Alfred Ngaro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise and take a call on this first reading of the Housing Legislation Amendment Bill in all its stages. And I first want to do that by acknowledging that this government, this national government, has a comprehensive plan for housing. That's right, we see the heckles, but here's the proof in the pudding, Mr. Speaker, because over there on that side, the spokesperson for housing has oftenly confirmed the comprehensive plan. When we think about the devolution of stock into the community housing providers, it was at the conference where the Speaker, for the housing on the Labour side, turned around and said, "We support this. This is a good idea. We should do this." And then all of a sudden, when we were doing it, he disagreed with it. When it came to the metropolitan urban limits, the Speaker for Labour, for housing, turned around and said, "No, this is not a great idea. We shouldn't attack this." And then all of a sudden, when we were addressing the metropolitan urban limits, he changed again. Why? Because he saw that this was a comprehensive plan. Mr. Speaker, we know it's comprehensive. We know it's making a difference. This housing legislation does two things in particular. It extends the Act, which we think is important, and it also puts a time limit on the consenting process. Mr. Speaker, we think that's important. Mr. Speaker, the previous speaker talked about the whole issue around crisis. But if the speakers on the other side had actually done their homework, and I hope that they have, they'll realise that this issue has been bubbling up since 1974. In fact, a previous Cabinet Minister of the Labour government, the Honourable Michael Bassett, was commissioned by the New Zealand Initiative to write a report. The report calls Priced Out. And in that report, he talked about when did housing become unaffordable in New Zealand. Inside of that report, he clearly states this is an issue that's been happening since 1974. Why? Because we have not been building to projected forecast growth in New Zealand over that period of time. So we know that that's been happening for quite some time, Mr. Speaker, so we think that's really important. Mr. Speaker, also too, while the little mumbling and the ground grinding over there, this maybe needs to listen. If he has read the Productivity Commission's report, what does it also say? It said one of the critical issues is around the slow process of consenting. The Special Housing Accord allows for us to fast-track the consenting so that we can ensure that we can address the issue. And what does it say? The issue is around supply. This housing issue is around supply. So, Mr. Speaker, we think that this is actually a critical important. The National Government wants to extend the Housing Accords and Special Housing Areas Act so that more special housing areas can be established and is appropriate for those different areas as well. We know that currently in Auckland, which is one of the most difficult places, there's 213 special housing areas. At least 140 of those are actually in the Auckland area, and that's making a difference. This will allow for the capacity of nearly 70,000 homes. Almost 65,000 of those are actually in the Auckland area. This becomes critical. Mr. Speaker, when people have talked about the metropolitan urban limits, and if we talk about Auckland in particular, where this becomes a critical issue and the Housing Accord and this Act becomes of greatest importance, that metropolitan urban limits came in 1999 under the Auckland Regional Council. It was an arbitrary line that was drawn, and we know that from that period of time, we could see the challenges that were happening. Mr. Speaker, in 2008, Gordon Copeland, who was inside the, Commerce Select Committee, went up to Auckland. They actually conducted an inquiry. Inside of that, Mr. Speaker, it clearly said that the metropolitan urban limits were conditionally allowing for land banking, and hence the reason why this bill becomes critically important to addressing that critical issue as well. So this legislation will allow for variation applications begun, not completed under the law to continue when a district plan becomes operative. We know that the current unitary plan will come into place on the 16th of September of this year. So that's the reasons why it's important for us to extend that and to allow for the opportunities for that development to happen as well. Mr. Speaker, we know that also too, that when we think about what's currently existed, and so we think about the incentivised process of this plan and why that becomes important. So we can just look at some of the numbers. The constructed growth, 76% under the number of homes being constructed per year in areas with housing accords have grown from 10,599 in the year to June 2013 to 18,693 in June of this year. We know that it makes a difference. We see that's important. Mr. Speaker, I commend this bill. Look forward to the ongoing debate throughout the House in urgency. Mr. Speaker, I commend this bill in its first reading to the House.